we're trying to do something new. We're presenting together, because we're going to show you how partnerships really works on the ground and also at a farm level.
So this is quite a unique thing. We certainly put this together with the idea that partnerships are a big, big part of the future. I think we could see today so many places around the world that it's not control. It's not a world of control anymore. It's a world of influence. And through partnerships throughout the food chain, we can really influence and bring about change.
And here we go. We will take you to something new that is happening far away from here in China. And that is where we have started to work together since the beginning by looking into what do we do together, because we have all understood for a long time that one single company, one single sector, une filière, we cannot fix it all alone. We have to work together, and that is also the reason why, and I will explain that a little bit later on, we have started almost 15 years ago to look into sustainable agriculture out of the perspective of a food industry. And here we go. We are talking about creating and sharing value together to nourish the world for the future. And we also, being a beef or being a dairy farmer, we have to carefully listen to the cosmic voice of the consumers and the cosmic voice also of society. And that's the reason why we are focusing on topics like nutrition. You are all in nutrition too, because the end of the value chain, of the food chain, ends up in human nutrition. To produce at a farm level, we need water. We need also water to cook a soup. And it's about rural development and not only technologies, because if rural communities are not developing, we're also not getting ensured supply. And that is about looking into sourcing, what we have to do on sourcing, and definitely taking care of natural, renewable resources. And here we go. That is a kind of a package we want to share with you, what is on our radar today.
And I think Nestle, I've been very impressed as I've gotten to know the company over the last 10 years, how much effort, how much work they put into developing suppliers, developing sources of the materials they need, and really bringing about a lot of the initiatives that are required. In Alltech, we talk about nourishing the world. This has really been the message that we've been bringing to the market, especially for the last 6 months. But it's exactly what we've been doing for years. Looking very deeply into nutrition, into the science behind nutrition, and thinking about new ways to innovate. And as we heard from Dr. Lyons earlier, his way really has been going out into the market, seeing what the requirements are, and coming back into his business with the connections he has, and trying to come up with solutions. This is really something that now perhaps we're establishing in a more fundamental way with the partnerships such as the one we have with Nestle. But I've been living the last 2 years in a place that in every presentation you've ever heard about this place, you always hear about speed. China is a place of enormous speed, and we heard about accelerating. We heard about speeding up today. China is always at a very frenetic pace, and its development today, we might be talking about slowdown of the economy or these types of things, but I would actually say the pace there is faster than ever, because so many fundamental things are changing within the way that country is operating. And most of this is really driven, again, by that consumer.
And here we go. I mean, yes, the pace is quick and it's going far at the same time. We know, and this is a clear declaration of the leaders of China, that urbanization will take place. And urbanization means that another 200 to 300 or even 300 to 400 million people will probably in a decade or at least 2 from now live in urban centers in addition to those who are already living. So these people, they rely on intact rural communities, on intact farming production systems, They will rely on professional farmers to supply them with food that is affordable and that is also quality assured and of highest level of food safety. And you see, this is a political, clearly decided direction. And now we in the industry, we have to make sure that we follow this direction and that we come in with clear solutions to be part of that societal development in that country.
I'd say it was just a couple of years ago that we had over 50% of the Chinese population in cities. And if you look at that 300 to 400 million, you have the equivalent of the entire population of the United States moving to cities. As Hans has said, that is strongly driven by the central planning of the government saying we need to have efficiencies, we need to have an ability to service all this huge, huge population with increasing demands, increasing requirements for their lifestyle. We also know that so much of the Chinese economy today has been in infrastructure, in building the basis for the country in the future. That is now shifting to a consumption-driven model, much similar, I suppose, to the West, where most of the economy will be driven by these consumers. It's still surprising, though, when we look at it, how much of China's own food it produces. It's something that I think is surprising, particularly when we look at China's neighbors, and you just see the fact that for many countries, self-sufficiency is really not in the cards anymore. However, China, especially in the dairy sector, really is reliant on foreign inputs. It's certainly reliant on foreign expertise, and at present has dipped below 80% of its own dairy production. So the requirements and the demand of dairy will continue to grow. Where that comes from and how it is produced is really the question. And I would argue that China must maintain a very high level of self-sufficiency really for it to be an acceptable food product for consumers. So if we look at the actual market, the total dairy cow number probably is actually closer to 10 million. There was a huge move out of the industry, a lot of small farmers exiting the market. Also, very, very high beef prices, causing many farmers to get out and sell into beef. There's about 5 million milking cows. So normally when you hear numbers from China, they talk about the total numbers. So it's a little bit different than the way we look at it the rest of the world. There's a number already of very large farms. Indeed, when I work with our team, most of our focus is on those large farms. Most of Nestle's products are actually being sourced by medium and small-sized farms. So a little bit of a difference. And if we look at the milk prices, I think for most of us in this room who are involved in dairy, we'd be quite happy with these types of prices. We have had situations where prices have actually gotten over $1 per liter. So it's a pretty good price. But the problem is volatility. When they get that high, suddenly imports look very, very attractive. And of course, the government can open and close those markets. So the Chinese producer must become increasingly efficient. The average producer is probably around 5.5 tons per year, but we do see as high as 12. And the top producing companies are all around 10. There's major focus, though. If you look in the industry today, many companies going public, IPOs, a lot of money going into this dairy industry, and many articles actually that came out recently talking about overheating. Was this going to be too much investment too quickly? And do we really have the number one thing that is required for this industry? People. Do we have competent individuals who can really drive this forward? There's also huge interest in the beef industry right now in China. Beef is a product that is very, very highly valued by Chinese consumers. And these two industries, dairy and beef, are closely linked.
And here we go. This is an interesting graph that is showing that also in China, the trees are not just growing into the sky. You know, there are also limits, and they are dells, and exactly this is what Mark said. We are expecting eventually even more volatility, and I will take you through the recent one, you know, because the prices, yes, they were extremely high yesterday at farm level. They're not anymore today. But yesterday, the day before, they were even higher priced a liter of milk at a farm gate than in Switzerland. Can you imagine that? That was the case. But is this sustainable? Is such a situation in the market really something where you can definitely please the consumer at the very far end, but on the very clear purpose, the reason why all of us are in business, because somewhere consumers are buying into our finished products. So you see that also here we had 2007 and 8 and 9, a price crisis that had immediately an impact on that milk output. But we have seen another one now in 13, and milk prices are down almost 40% at farm level in China. That also creates a totally different scenario for exactly those people you just said, who are looking into making big money in a short period of time, going with an IPO, with a financing from third parties, and going into just establishing farms because it is looking like a very good investment. But we are looking mainly not for helping farmers to go in that investment for a short term. We're looking for a very long-term approach, because you, as a farmer, you know that your business you're in is per se also a long-term approach view. And this is what we have to bring to this society, to look into being linked to nature and having a link to nature for the long run and not just for a short and a quick return on investment. And here I take you back to what we said about urbanization. Someone also in China was probably listening to Mr. Lyons about his 5Ds. Someone decided we want to go for urbanization. But someone also decided that milk will now become an integral part of a Chinese diet. And I will show you what this decision is really provoking now, as we're looking into, for instance, the consumption of fresh milk equivalent in rural areas. Exactly there where you are producing milk, you have the lowest consumption. Whereas in urban areas in China today, it's almost to a factor of 5, 15 kilograms, 5 times higher than in rural areas. And we see that this is going to double, and it's really on the way to double by 18. And probably it will double again and again. And this is something I referred to when I was in Brazil. Where are the Brazilians here? Because I have met them yesterday. Where are they? Here. In the 80s, people told me, you will never be able to sell so much cheese, so much this, so much that. Do you know that in Brazil now, in certain areas, not in the entire country, we have higher milk per capita consumption than in Europe? And this is mainly linked not only because there are outstanding product there, but people have purchasing power. They can afford. And this is exactly the driver that is also in China. People can afford now to buy into high nutritious dairy products. And that is the main driver of giving a lot of opportunities to produce milk in China. But the big question remains, does China has enough natural resources, has enough technology, and also has enough human resources to run their dairies? And this is what we want to show you on the next slide here, that when things are going a little bit out of control, you have this kind of situation, where in fact you have the highest milk prices. You see that on the red bar in China, and where you're also looking into how do you have to feed the cows to produce milk. I don't know if you are aware, do we have the Chinese here? Where are the Chinese? Where is the Chinese delegation? How much feed you have to import to feed, or how much fodder crops you have to import to really feed the cows to produce a liter of milk. So in any case, that is also not a secret anymore. Not only by importing more cows, not only by running bigger dairies, you can really balance out the supply with demand, but definitely you will be linked to reach these consumption patterns of Chinese consumers to the rest of the dairy world. And what is going to happen and what is happening today in China affects all of you, those who are into dairy, around the globe. That is one of the key messages. So we better understand and carefully listen to what is happening in this country. Because China needs to produce, because China wants to consume. And that is the really simple reason why we put our ideas together and we said, well, what is missing in this whole equation? There is a kind of a crisis out there, but we have also learned by a previous presentation that the crisis is also an opportunity. So we're rather looking into the opportunity, and the opportunity is that we together help to produce more milk in China. Reason why we are starting this idea of creating what we call a dairy farming institute. Now, do we have to say the world that we know what you have to do? You better know than we do how to run dairy farms. And that is the reason why we cannot do it alone. And we created out of this vision an idea really to have a hub in China where we say this should be a kind of a leading center, having the recognition of being the competent center for dairy farming and bringing the very best from the West to the East into China, and mainly listening to practitioners. So we are also here to invite you to join us on this venture and to have a look into and to guide us in which direction we have to take that idea to implement and to train our Chinese colleagues. And that is the main task. It all starts with focusing on people. We need farm managers, we need people, professionals who know how to run these new farms.
So this has been a very interesting project, and it was actually, as I moved to China 2 years ago, Hans called up his colleagues in Nestle China and said, this guy Mark's coming over, maybe you should have a chat with him. And it was real serendipity, because I was actually on the phone with Dr. Lyons, and he said, Mark, what we need over there is we need a farm, and we should put all the best, everything we know, all these friends we have from global beef and dairy, and we need to have them come to China, and we need to create something. And I happened to have a coffee with Robert Earhart, who's headed up this DFI project, Dairy Farming Institute project. And he said, no, Mark, you can't do that. Come with us and work with us. And I think it's been that shared value, that idea that Nestle has that is so open, that has been a special opportunity for us to be able to create this, this institute. So this is what it's going to look like. It's actually imminent. October 15th will be the official opening, and we have a beautiful dairy institute. But I think what is really unique with this is obviously the location, northern China, where we saw most of those dairy cows are, but also the fact that there's dairy cows right there. Almost 8,000 dairy cows ultimately will be on this site, but uniquely in 3 different farms. So we will have a farm, different farm sizes, different farm styles, that when we have dairy farmers going on, they can say, that doesn't look that dissimilar to my farm at home. And I can see how I could grow into that. I can see how I might be able to double my cow numbers. And the whole financing, the whole expertise that's needed to make that increase is all there in that center. So this is what essentially we're looking at, 3 different styles of farms, 3 different elements in some place where people can really go and practically see what dairy farming is all about. Also incorporating leading companies from inside of China, from outside of China, experts in each of their own areas. So it's a very, very unique and extremely ambitious project, really, that has been led from Nestle right from the start. I might just ask one question. If anybody can notice that center, any idea of what that represents? Well, the vision of this is to be a center of competence, to have that influence, to create those partnerships. So that center right in the middle is actually a drop of milk and the wave that comes up outside of it. That's why there's that hole in the middle. And so that's really the whole vision, the whole ethos is really even brought in the architecture of the building, because we want the ripples of this center to spread out from all through China and beyond.
And you know, the important thing is not to have a megalomaniac thing. I mean, we know that our Chinese colleagues, they all like big things. And this is a big country and a wonderful big nation. And we know that from cities, how they build cities. So we have to respect what they believe is the right thing to do, even if we, from a Western perspective, do not have all the time the same ideas. But anyhow, the idea about this Dairy Farming Institute is like a little bit a practitioner college. You know, it's not, we do not want to have, we have academics there, yes, who may train, that's okay, but we don't want to have a kind of an academical setup in China. We want to go with professional and vocational training of farmers. And this is also a new way, and we blend that into a kind of where we are coming from Switzerland, where we have a lot of this apprenticeship programs ongoing. And it's maybe not by coincidence that those countries here in Europe who have still these apprenticeship programs ongoing, today have the lowest youth unemployment rates. And those who put everybody into an academic training today has a problem. And I think this is also something we are trying to bring into this idea of the Dairy Farming Institute, really to go on, hands-on, put the moody boots on, and really learn what works. But this is something we don't know. This is something you know. And eventually, your expertise here would be, as I said before, very well welcomed. Because there's many tricks from practitioners and the long-term experience that is not yet in China. However, we can argue, and that is what I'm listening to, well, you know, now we should help, you know, to build a new competitor out there. Is that what you have in mind? Yes, many of you, they think like this. I don't see like this. I see it as an opportunity to also serve this market long term. And many of you here in the European environment, lifting the quotas next year, may have this opportunity, because we're looking into how much cows this market needs over the next 5 to 6 years. And this is, let's say, under European productivity conditions, it's about 750,000 cows. China is importing how many? 120,000 cows a year, huh? Is that correct? Yes. So where are the remaining 500,000 cows? These are your cows. Everywhere in the world we will have these cows, and it's not over 5, 6 years. It's in addition every next at least 3, 4, 5 years. So these additional cows, they will not be milked in China. They will be milked in your countries, eventually in your stables, eventually back home in your countries. And we have to make sure that we are connected and we stay interconnected, that we can serve from your production base also the demand of this big market out there.
I would say that that's a very important point, because as we've talked about from the beginning, this is all about partnership. And it's certainly the case that in China, if you don't have the relationship, you will never have the market access. If you don't share and you don't create that shared value, this market will be closed off. And that's where we have to see with the DFI. The Dairy Farming Institute has a number of different audiences. And so we have to be making sure that we're communicating to them, and we're putting a major communication program together where dairy farmers, but also consumers, also government, will all be able to receive the types of information they want to really make this an open center. Any dairy farmer, any dairy farming company, any milk processor can send people there. The doors are open. It's really, I think, a very innovative and really forward-thinking type of approach. So you can actually see this place does exist. The farms are being put together, and we really have a beautiful site coming together. And again, in 6 weeks, we'll be there in Xuancheng, 45 minutes south of Harbin, to open this center.
Do we have someone from Australia here? Yes? No?
Yep, back there.
We have Australian ladies here at that farm, about
Yeah, they're all
1100,
Australian
I think,
ladies.
yeah?
Yes.
And I got, from time to time some messages that, no, the ladies from Australia arrived by boat. So the genetic is from Australia here in this center to start with. Yeah?
So this is really about offering a career. There will be extremely practical, basic things taught here. There will be very high-level events and ideas here. Who knows? Would we eventually have a global beef and dairy meeting there in Xuancheng? This is the type of place that really needs to have that presence, needs to have that image, but at the same time has to remain extremely focused on those local farmers and those issues that they have.
And it's really looking into, as I said at the beginning, at the whole cycle of production. And looking into land solutions. We don't have all the solutions out there yet, by far not. It's looking into good dairy farming practices, to train people to follow these good dairy farming practices, and to do it in a very disciplined way. And to look into also the solution, to find out with whom do we now create the next generation of dairy farmers. So selecting the right people there, that they can become dairy farmers and that they can also be the owner of their farm. I prefer to have owner-operated farmers being our suppliers than talking to a banker about the milk price because he has financed a farming operation. Yes, we need a banker to finance, but we want to have, by the end, owner-operators also in China, and not only people sitting in Shanghai or in Hong Kong to tell us what to do in this industry. And therefore, we have to come up with financing solutions, again, together with bankers, but having in mind that we want really to go with what we call the Agropreneurship training on our supplier base of Nestle worldwide. We don't do that only with milk farmers. We do it with cocoa, with grain. We do it also with coffee farmers. And that means that you have to have a kind of a technical support, and we can give technical support on feeding technologies, but Alltech can do that. We cannot give financial support, but eventually, one day, a bank, even if it's a European bank, can give this support, or a local Chinese agricultural bank. So that means, once again, we cannot fulfill our vision, our aim, our dream, doing it alone. It's just impossible because the task is too big. But what we can do is to create this kind of center, to have a kind of a one-stop solution for someone who wants to engage and who sees a professional career in dairy farming in China. And this is what we propose, and this is where, once again, we invite you also, who knows, one day to visit us or to contribute to that wonderful idea.
So, I think it's time for a break. I see you probably all have gotten your Kit Kats, and you've probably already eaten them. I know Dr. Carl Dawson has. I think he ate it before most of you are even in. And I think ours has melted in my pocket. But this idea was really a clever one, and you can imagine who thought of it. Dr. Lyons was talking about how wonderful this project was, and he said, what is it? What is it that people know about Nestle? What do they like? A Kit Kat. So we put this together, and we were sharing this with customers around the world to share the story of the DFI and share the idea of partnership. And so actually, one of our first Margin of Excellence winner, Dr. Anne Kuntz, is now living in Beijing. She's moving up to Xuancheng very soon, and she will be heading up our efforts there in that facility. And what she will be doing is something you're probably going to be hearing about a little bit later, but it's something called an in vitro fermentation model. So it's very exciting that we can actually look at almost any feed material and tell you what is the actual value of this, what would be the impact that this would have in terms of that animal's productivity, in terms of its milk yield. So that is the thing we're going to be focusing on. But I'll go back to one thing. This idea of partnership has been done before. And indeed, it was Hans and it was Nestle who provided the leadership with establishing something called the SAI platform, Sustainable Agricultural Initiatives.
You know, this is a little bit the kind of a déjà vu situation. Because a lot of people listening to the very first time to this Dairy Farming Institute idea will say, well, this guy is rather crazy. Huh? But no, it's not about craziness. It's also not about being brilliant intellectually. It's about having an idea and mainly to see how much people can be part of that idea and benefit from it. And that is the reason why we came back, you know, to that idea. We started about almost 15 years ago to create this Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform from the food industry's perspective. Because this is about bridging between consumers and you, farmers. It's not us to tell you what to do, but to better understand, listening here to the consumers, and then trying really to make it happen together with you. And that is the history. We started together with Danone and Unilever here in Europe because it was the easiest way to get a start with that. Nowadays, you're looking into that whole worldwide activity, and we have now, in fact, there are almost 60 members, and we're active on many continents. And this is all about putting together in a way that we can say to consumers where it's coming from. So this is about traceability. This is about disclosure of full knowing where it's coming from on one hand, but also knowing about the production system, how has it been made, that you can really tell this to your consumers. You can tell that through brands. You can eventually work it out, sometimes even with retailers. But I think that you are all consumers, as I am a consumer. We have the right to know where it's coming from and where it has been produced. But if we're not, again, working together end to end, we cannot tell, and by that we do not earn the trust. If you want to stay trusted, you better have an idea about where do you source from. And you see who has joined. You know, we have a lot of milk companies and milk organizations. So we have here, for instance, we have the Arla people, we have First Milk, Fonterra, Friesland, just to name some of them, Danone. I mean, yeah, I just talked to my colleague and friend, and he said I should join too, yeah. Maybe that is a pledge, you know, to all those people who are listening to you. But anyhow, Land O'Lakes, so you see we're really everywhere on the planet. And yes, we also want now to establish these ideas in the DFI in China. So that is the idea, what we have, taking this kind of same approach or similar approach on sustainable dairy farming to China.
So this is something that we actually began a year and a half ago, trying to establish that SAI platform for dairy in China. And obviously the most critical factor is that this first part is established just as the SAI platform was established by large European companies here. I think it's very, very important that it's established by Chinese companies in China. So this is a process that we're undertaking, and we see the DFI being really the platform to launch something bigger. And certainly sustainability is something that is a huge topic. When you talk to government officials in China today, they're talking about efficiency, they're talking about environmental impact, they're talking about food safety. They're talking about the same issues that we talk about in Europe, and they're talking about them actually, I would argue, in a very, very fast-moving way. They want the changes quickly, and so this is a very, very relevant topic.
And once again, I think we conclude that here you see where we are and what we have in mind. The farmer is really in the middle of that equation. If we do not have you to take care of natural resources, if you do not have you to go with dairy farming practices that are sustainable, we can definitely not please consumers. And if the consumers, they have a choice, they decide, they are also on the 5 Ds, they decide, either they go with our brands, with other brands, with whatever, but they also decide, if they buy or if they don't buy dairy. And if we, as a filière, like a dairy group, we cannot collectively convince that dairy is good for the planet and is good for your nutrition, for your health, then we have failed our mission. And that is the very simple reason why we have to join force and we have to come up with one voice and not with 50 different voices, because we're facing a lot of headwind today, listening to NGOs or listening to so-called whatever consumer reaction groups, that the worst you can see in this world is what? A cow that pollutes. And it is mainly those people who are telling you the story who got a lot of very good dairy products and they're healthy and happy today. Those people are telling us these stories. So I think this is also a call to arms in terms of really taking this idea of sustainability and high nutrition out of what we do. May it be animal protein in the center of the diet, and someone decided that the consumers in China should really take into their daily diet animal proteins, also in the form of milk. So you see, I think we have an opportunity, we have a lot of things to do together, and we have a bright future. Now we have to make that happen, and we have to eventually also influence a little bit politicians, because if we have disruption into this equation of farmer, transformer, trade into consumer, we go with bad policy decision. And we should really take our voice higher also to eventually address those things to politicians. But anyhow, keep in mind the very simple reason you and I have a job is because we serve consumers.
So I think that that's a great thing to end on. This certainly is an example, we believe, of communicating, of influencing, and of partnering. And we hope that all of you can come and visit us in northern China and see the DFI for yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.